Hello? Oh, yay. Okay. Good afternoon. I would like to welcome you all to today's Black History Month kickoff with Dean Marla Frederick as our keynote speaker. But before we bring Dean Frederick to the stage, I would like to welcome UMES President Dr. Heidi Anderson to bring us some words.
Oh, wow, it feels up in here. Well, greetings, everyone. I was about to say good morning, but it's already afternoon, isn't it? To our students, I want to say welcome back. I already said that to the faculty and staff last month, but students, I missed you guys. But let me start by saying thank you, students and faculty and staff and all of our community leaders who are here today. This is a very, very special day for us because it is the start of kicking off Black History Month. And Black History Month gives us, yes, you can clap on that. It is an opportunity for us to celebrate our history, but also to celebrate our culture and to look at what the past generations have taught us and what they have brought us. And so it's an opportunity for us to reflect. If you read my message that went out earlier this week, you'll know that this is it's a moment that really has touched my heart, and I hope yours as well. Part of what makes today so special is I want to give thanks to our VP Vickers, who is the Vice President for Strategic Communication and Marketing, and his AVP Hilton and their team, because they have put together a phenomenal speaker series for the entire month, but also for the year. And today we are graced with, what can I say, just Her Majesty herself. This speech today, I think you will hopefully find it to be very inspiring, very reflective, but one that really is about the moment that we are in today. Students, it thrills my heart to see all of you here because the past is about you, because you learn from that, we learn from it, and you are our future. So you also are really making history today, and that makes all of us so proud. So that's why this moment is so wonderful. And I just want to say thank you to everyone and to Vickers and ADP for their teams for pulling all of this together and for you taking time to be here with us. So you're about to be inspired, and I hope that you will leave and reflect on the words. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Again, my name is Charmaine Helton. I am the AVP for Strategic Communications and Marketing here at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And I am very excited to bring Dean Marla Frederick to the stage. Dean Frederick is the Dean of the Harvard Divinity School, the first Black woman in its 207-year existence to hold that position. Before she was Dean of Harvard Divinity School, oh wait, let me also say she is the John Lord O'Brien Professor of Divinity. She's a Professor of Religion and Culture and a Professor of African and African American Studies at Harvard. And prior to that, she served as the Asa Griggs Candler Professor of Religion and Culture at Emory University's Candler School of Theology. She earned her PhD from Duke University, but before she earned her PhD at Duke, she earned her undergraduate degree at Spelman College, an HBCU. She understands HBCU. She was Miss Spelman 1994. And I'm also proud to say she was my friend and has been for over 30 years as we were freshmen together in the same dorm, on the same hall, on the same floor. So it is my greatest honor to bring Dean Marla Frederick to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my great honor to be with you today. I tell you, you need to keep in contact with your close friends from college. They can open up doors for you you didn't even know you needed opening. And so for the Vice President of Communications, Charmaine Helton, thank you. Charmaine said we were on the same freshman dorm. We were at Spelman. We were in a dorm called HH, Howard Harrell, 2 doors down. And so we love our dorms. So the thing is, you will meet at Spelman and you'll say, the first thing you say, what dorm were you in? Right? So we are HH Phi Beta from head to toe. HH Phi Beta, wherever we go. HH Phi Beta, so fresh and new. HH Phi Beta, we thought you knew. Okay, so this was us. This was us in our freshman year. We thought we had the best dorm. We had the best dorm decorations. We won all the competitions, as we like to tell it. But it was a monumental time being at Spelman in those days and building friendships and relationships that last a lifetime. And so, Charmaine, thank you so much for the very warm welcome. I was honored when she reached out to me to be here at UMES. I've always wanted to come to this campus. I've heard so many wonderful things about the campus over the years, and so it's a great honor for me to meet your president, Dr. Anderson, and the incredible staff here who really have greeted me with such warm hospitality. And I've been impressed by the campus because I've learned about so many of the unique programs at this particular HBCU. The sequential arts program, the aviation program, the veterinary program that's going to start soon. We see that in the future. And so it really is a pleasure and a privilege for me to be here. As your Black History Month speaker in the year of our Lord 2026, I thought that in these trying times, I would speak on the critical importance of education and the critical importance of HBCUs specifically. In these trying times, I thought it important to talk about them as the nation turns 250 years old this year, and the nation has advanced as long as it has, particularly on matters of justice and equality, in large part because of the contributions of HBCUs and their graduates, whether the country recognizes it or not. And so my theme for this afternoon is HBCUs and the making of American history, the power of memory. Despite recent and persistent efforts to erase Black history, the admonition of generations is clear. We must remember. In 1931, Langston Hughes published a poem entitled The Negro Mother. In it, he writes, "Children, I come back today to tell you the story of the long, dark way that I had to climb, that I had to know in order that the race might live and grow." Look at my face, dark as the night, yet shining like the sun with love's true light. I am the child they stole from the sand 300 years ago in Africa's land. I am the dark girl who labored as a slave, beaten and mistreated for the work that I gave. Children sold away from me, husbands sold too. No safety, no love, no respect was I due. 300 years in the deepest South, but God put a song and a prayer in my mouth. God put a dream like steel in my soul. Now through my children, I'm reaching the goal. Now through my children, young and free, I realized the blessings denied to me. I couldn't read then, I couldn't write, I had nothing back then in the night. Sometimes the valley was filled with tears, but I had to keep trudging on through the lonely years. I had to keep on, no stopping for me. I was the seed of the coming free. I nourished the dream that nothing could smother deep in my breast, the Negro mother. The poem goes on, but the point is this. Hughes explains in the first line the importance of Black history. He says, I come back today to tell you the story. The single reason I'm here is to tell you this story, the trauma, the suffering, the resilience, and the hope of the ancestors. It is a story we must hear, we must know, we must read, we must understand, and by all means, we must remember. Lamenting the endless stories of slave traders captured in slave ship logs and journals and in books, versus the complete absence of the words of the enslaved, Zora Neale Hurston writes in her book Barracoon, The Story of the Last Black Cargo, where she tries to tell the story of Casalo, the last living enslaved African in the United States. She laments as she talks about the importance of writing Casalo's story. She says, all the words of the seller, not one word from the sold. The kings and captains whose words moved ships, but not one word from the cargo. Not one word from the millions brought over, cramped and packaged in the belly of slave ships. It is an outrage. To tell the stories of those unknown and unnamed is thus sacred work. It is the work we must hasten to complete as generations pass before our very eyes. An African proverb laments, it says, the death of an elder is like the burning of a library. The stories, the history, all gone. The understanding of oneself in relationship to the world, gone. To know, to hear, to remember their stories is indeed revolutionary work. And so the first thing we must do when we think about HBCUs and the making of these United States of America is to remember and to know the history. You have to pass it on. Why? Hughes says, so that the race might live and grow. One might submit that the recent and full-throated attempt to erase Black history is not an effort to simply tell somehow a more beautiful American story. One might submit that it's not to end, quote unquote, reverse racism. It's not even, as one might argue, about making certain fragile people feel good about American history. The goal at the end of the day, our ancestors might argue, is to nullify your strength, to erase your dignity, and to stunt in every way possible your growth and hinder your capacity for achievement. Marcus Garvey, after all, says a people without knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. James Baldwin puts it this way, if you know whence you came, there really is no limit to where you can go. And Mother Maya Angelou says it this way, the more you know of your history, the more liberated you are. And thus the converse is also true. The Christian scriptures put it simply like this, the people perish for lack of knowledge. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. 1 Peter 5:8 says, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. One preacher I heard said, the translation is really, stay woke, because your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Knowledge is power. And the work of HBCUs has long been to raise up generations of leaders who are not only excellent in their work, but who understand who they are because they understand whose they are and the great legacy in which they stand. If I know nothing else about HBCUs, despite being perpetually underfunded, I know that HBCUs are beacons of light, anchors of strength, literal underground railroads to freedom, justice, and equality. And not just for Black Americans, but for this entire country. They have birthed leaders who have been the conscience of this country. While other universities have created countless titans of industry and bounded elected officials, they haven't always come wrapped in the moral courage and visionary promise that demand that the U.S. live up to the potential of its Constitution and creed. It is, however, at HBCUs where it is endemic to the experience to create leaders who have, as Martin Luther King Jr. described, intelligence plus character. An 18-year-old Martin Luther King Jr., writing in the Morehouse School newspaper, shared his thoughts on education. King had observed that Eugene Talmadge, the quote, hate-filled segregationist governor of Georgia, held a Phi Beta Kappa key. King reflected, by all measuring rods, Mr. Talmadge could think critically and intensively. Yet he contends that I am an inferior being. Are those the types of men we call educated? We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character. That is the goal of true education. Training the head and tuning the heart, as Morehouse defines its mission, exemplifies this essential element of teaching and learning. We will need character now more than ever to get through these dark days of discord. The type of character that insists on seeing and valuing the full humanity, even of those with whom we disagree, and maybe even especially. This was in part the great genius of historically Black colleges and universities, the insistence upon the cultivation of intelligence plus character. HBCUs were founded largely during the period immediately after the Civil War and before 1910, though some earlier schools were founded in the North before the Civil War began. Yet these schools were founded largely under duress. As education historian Jarvis Givens notes, the threat of an educated Black class stood to challenge, quote, the entire order of things. After the Civil War, he writes, and especially in the decades following the end of Reconstruction, Black education in the South was violently suppressed or starved of adequate state funding and left to perish. Between 1866 and 1876, well over 600 Black Southern schools were burned. At the end of the 20th century, W.B. Du Bois described whites' fierce opposition to Black education as having, quote, showed itself in ashes, insult, and blood. We've been in treacherous times before. These schools were developed in the midst of white Southern violence and aggression, often led by white Southern Christians. Formerly enslaved persons unable to attend white universities and in need of education and skills to survive pooled their minimal resources together. Through the aid of Black religious bodies, white Northern missionary associations, and eventually with the federal government, the help of the federal government, over 120 HBCUs were established. The University of Maryland Eastern Shore was one of those, as you well know. First established in 1886 by the Methodist Episcopal Church, and then later funded by the state of Maryland under the Second Morrill Act of 1890. Why the second and not the first? As you know, the first Morrill Act of 1862 established mostly white land-grant institutions like Clemson University, the University of Maryland at College Park, North Carolina State University, the University of Georgia, among others. The second Morrill Act of 1890, however, established all but 3 of the land-grant HBCUs created to maintain segregation and white supremacy. Eventually, the Morrill Land-Grant Act founded a public college in each of the states. In 1965, the U.S. Congress gave all of these colleges, those founded by the states and private entities, the special designation of historically Black colleges and universities. These HBCUs would be central to building up a Black educated class and helping to anchor hope and possibility for students of other races who joined their ranks. These colleges cultivated doctors who would address health disparities in Black communities, lawyers and judges who could help fight for civil rights and voting rights for all Americans, professors and scholars who would research and write American history and the critical importance of African Americans to the development of this country. Whether celebrating the visionary leadership of those graduating from numerous colleges or universities like Howard Law School or Meharry Medical School or CAU's Business School or UMES, the compounded interest of their decades-long impact is felt both in places seen and unseen, known and unknown. Today's generation of college students, we are educated in schools that we did not build, enjoying the fruit of seeds that we did not plant, all because those who came before us were willing to sacrifice to see the world and its needs as God sees them. In the midst of a brutal and hateful world, they built a future for their children and their children's children against the backdrop of hatred and brutality levied at Black people. They built. And as we endeavor to know our history and to share the history of these schools, we must always remember the work that Black women have done to undergird these institutions. Too often when histories are told, they often focus on the preacher, the pastor, or the president, roles historically reserved for men. But women were at the heart of the movement for Black education and the building of HBCUs. And so secondly, we must remember to honor the women. Women of deep faith were central to the building of HBCUs. Two white women, abolitionists from the North, Sophia Packard and Harriet Giles, founded my alma mater, our alma mater, Spelman College, in 1881. They were part of the Northern Missionary Association's efforts to continue the work of liberation after the Civil War. But it didn't stop with them. In surveying the extent of Black-owned property in the early 1900s, W.E.B. Du Bois once opined, quote, "Despite the noisier and more spectacular advance of my brothers, I instinctively feel and know that it is the 5 million women of my race who really count." At the time, Du Bois estimated that Black women raised 3/4 of the money used to acquire church property. Black women as key fundraisers, even primary leaders of schools, is the untold story of Black religious life. When Black religious organizations began fundraising to build schools and eventually colleges, they often relied on the labor of Black women to undergird their efforts. As historian Wilson Fallon writes about the founding of Selma University, the Women's Baptist State Convention of Alabama was established for the express purposes of supporting Selma University. He explains, quote, "Women constituted the majority of the Black Baptist Church membership. In addition, they served as the chief fundraisers. In 1886, E.M. Brawley, president of Selma University, founded the Alabama Baptist Women's Convention to provide support for the university. Selma University and the state's Black Baptist Women's Convention followed a similar pattern of fundraising as other Black Baptist state conventions, with women at the helm. I know this story firsthand. With the founding of the First Baptist Missionary Church and Morris Brown College in my hometown of Sumter, South Carolina, Du Bois's proclamation again rings true. One cannot tell the story of the church's founding or of Morris College's founding without pointing to the sacrificial work of women in the community. 3 women, former and free issue slaves, Mary Mitchell, Minnie Blair, and Tilda Bush, established the First Baptist Church in Sumter in 1868, just 3 years post-emancipation, while meeting under a tree. By 1877, they had built their own edifice. And so by 1909, Morris College was established as the first Black Baptist college in the state of South Carolina, founded by Blacks for Black folks. Morris is different from Benedict College in Columbia, South Carolina, another Baptist school, because Benedict was established by white missionaries from the White Northern Baptist Association, who were engaged in this type of social gospel work as well. They understood that the next step on the freedom journey after emancipation was education. What is telling about women's role in the story of Morris College are the minutes of one of the Baptist E&M Society meetings. In 1906, the South Carolina Women's Baptist Educational and Missionary Committee received a recommendation from the Baptist Educational and Ministry Committee that it become an auxiliary to the women's organization in order for it to, quote, to be in harmony with the National Baptist Convention and all other state Baptist conventions. The Baptist Educational and Missionary Convention all recommended that the Women's Baptist Educational and Missionary Convention turn over all of their money to help the Baptist Educational and Missionary Convention carry out its work. The Women's Baptist Educational and Missionary Conventions Committee had been for years raising money for the primary purpose of supporting the development of Morris College. And so upon receiving, quote unquote, the recommendation from the Baptist Educational and Missionary Convention, the Women's Committee on Recommendations responded with the following statement. Feeling that while it may be right for our convention to unite with our brethren's convention of this state, that at the present it would not be the expedient thing to do. We ask, therefore, that the recommendation from the various sources asking for said cooperation or union be tabled indefinitely. Translated, we don't know what y'all are trying to do with this money. We don't know why you need our money, but we're about the business of trying to build Morris College. Bringing this story a little closer to home, my father graduated from Morris College in the 60s and eventually returned as the college's business manager. Growing up, I often heard him speak fondly of his time at Morris, serving under the presidency of Dr. O.R. Rubin, who had allowed my dad, a former sharecropper, to serve as his driver for 4 years in order to pay for college. Once he completed school, Dr. Rubin sent him to Atlanta University to earn his MBA so that he could return to Morris to serve as business manager. As my father liked to tell stories of his old days, he would say, you know, when I was business manager at Morris, and we needed to raise $50,000 in order to build a dormitory, he said, I would go tell the preachers of the Baptist State Convention, brothers, I need $50,000 to build this building. He said, they said to him, Bruh Frederick, we'll pledge 50 and give what we can. He said, but when I asked the women, Dr. Beatrice Sanders, Dr. Anna D. Rubin, Ms. Margaret Davis, he said, when I tell them I needed $50,000, he said, it was like money in the bank. The check would show up on my desk. The women, he said, built that college. And so I cannot tell the story of the building of Black institutions, and we cannot tell these stories, and particularly Black educational institutions, without telling the story of women's labor, without telling the story of those who work day in and day out sacrificing to bring these institutions to life. For historically Black colleges to close in this day and age is in many ways to close the door on women's history. Women whose minds were steadfast on the work and will of God. They knew that God had called them and their children and their children's children to greater heights and deeper depths. And so our charge finally today is to continue their work. During a speech at a conference on HBCUs, U.S. Secretary of Education under Biden, Miguel Cardona, gave these powerful numbers. He said, while making up only 3% of all universities in our country, historically Black colleges and universities graduate nearly 20% of all African American students earning a bachelor's degree. 80% of all Black judges started and an HBCU. 75% of Black officers in the armed forces, 75% of Black PhDs and Black doctors, 70% of Black dentists, 50% of Black teachers, engineers, and lawyers come from HBCUs. 40% of Black members of Congress, 25% of Black graduates in the STEM field, and he added 100% of Black and female vice presidents of the United States. Put simply, these institutions are critical to making our country better. How could our ancestors have known then what their labors would produce now? It was impossible to know, but they walked in faith. Knowing our history, reminding us of how far we've come and compels us towards the work ahead. Honoring women affirms for us the need for all hands on deck. We didn't come this far without the sacrificial work of many, regardless of race, gender, or sexuality, in the midst of challenging times. The past year has been hard on higher education and on Black history. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been cut from higher education budgets, from research, from tuition support, from faculty positions. Student loans for college have been made more difficult to acquire. The histories of Black leaders and Black progress have been erased from websites and national monuments and banned from the bookshelves of schools, all while homage to enslavers have been restored. Programs designed to help marginalized people gain access to opportunities have been disassembled, and efforts to dismantle the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act have been persistent. The moment we are living in is disconcerting. The stakes are high, and they are in some ways highest for your generation. Will you remember? Will you know? Will you understand all that has been lost and all that must be regained? Will the multiracial, multi-religious democracy that has been so painstakingly brought into being over the last 60 years through the efforts of the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, the fledgling, though ever-present Poor People's Campaign, and all movements in service of equality, will this democracy wilt because of ignorance of the history and indifference to the present? Your roots say no. Your presence here at UMEC says no. Your lineage as the inheritors of a rich legacy of HBCU graduates says no. You will indeed meet the moment, and in fact, you will bring this promise into full bloom. Regardless of your race, your gender, your economic position, you are walking in a rich legacy. Our schools, HBCUs, were built by a multiracial coalition of leaders, founders, presidents, professors, who, as the young people like to say, understood the assignment. And the assignment has not changed. The work continues. Enter to learn, depart to serve. Or as your school motto says, facta non verba. Deeds, not words. It is a commitment to action and excellence, a commitment to intelligence plus character, and a faithful commitment to honor the legacy of freedom and justice for all. You are, after all, as Langston Hughes said, the seed of the coming free. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Frederick. At this time, I would like to invite our 57th SGA president, Mr. Armani Dukes, who is going to lead us in a Q&A with Dean Frederick.
I kind of wanted to, before we get into the questions, talk on something very fundamental to kind of HBCUs themselves, generational wealth. And if you don't know what that is, generational wealth is, firstly, for our finance majors, if we have any here, generational wealth is essentially something that's accrued over time throughout generations. Is that not what our school is? Our school is something that's been passed down between generations to generations of students that, not just students, from leaders that have created something that's for people like us, you know? Take pride in your alma mater, take pride in yourself, take pride in thy neighbor, love thy neighbor, you know what I mean? Make sure that you take pride. If you feel like you need to do something on campus that you feel like it's just not right, feel like there's injustices, take pride in what you're doing, because you very much could be the Harriet, you know what I mean? You very much could be creating something that no one has seen before. So please, if you want to do it now, because this is something that's lasting change forever. And with that being said, I'd like to get into our questions.
Come on, Fred. Come on, Fred.
All right, Dean Frederick. I understand that you were quite engaged with student activities as an undergraduate. SGA, is SGA in here? Yeah. Ms. Spellman, I know Court's right here. Can you please tell our students how those activities helped you in your career?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there was something about, I was involved in SGA from my freshman year through my senior year, and then ran for the spell in my senior year. But being involved, there are so many benefits to that. It's getting to know your fellow classmates in a different way. It's not sitting in your room on your phone scrolling. You know, you're engaged, you're learning people, you're knowing people. But it gives you leadership opportunities to create programs. One of the things I did as Ms. Spellman was to create a tutoring program at the elementary school close to Spellman. And so it gives you leadership opportunities, it gives you community. And I think that kind of gives you the kind of strength and sense of oneself and one's own possibility that stepping away, not being involved. I told my nieces, both of them graduated from Howard, one graduated last year, the other one graduated 2 years ago. I said, yeah, when you go to Howard, you have to get involved. I don't care what you get involved with as far as student organizations, but you have to get involved because it's a part of the whole learning process. It's what happens in the classroom, but it's also about what happens outside of the classroom.
I love that. Thank you very much for that. Second question. What was your transition like from an HBCU to students who aspire to an Ivy League? And what advice can you give to students who aspire to kind of get into that graduate school or academic life?
So when I graduated from Spelman, it was 1994, I went to Duke. I majored in cultural anthropology. I was inspired to major in cultural anthropology. I had planned on going to law school all of my years at Spelman, and then I did this program, Preparing Minorities for Academic Careers, because I didn't have anyone in my family who had a PhD, but this program exposed or introduced students to what PhD research was about. And my senior year, Dr. Gloria Wade Gales, who recently passed last week, she was a mentor and professor for Charmaine and I and so many Spelman women, but she encouraged me to go on to PhD studies. She said somewhat jokingly, she was like, oh, Marla, we don't need any more Black lawyers. We need Black scholars who are gonna research and write our history and who are gonna educate the next generation. Like she was so inspirational. I decided to go on to graduate school and decided to study cultural anthropology because my senior year, I also took a course from the president of the college at the time, Dr. Janetta Cole, who taught one course, even as president, on Wednesday evenings. She taught an intro to anthropology course, and I fell in love with that course. And so I told Dr. Cole at the end of the year, I said, I'm gonna go to graduate school and study cultural anthropology. I'm gonna study the Black church. And she said, my dear Spelman sister Marla, if you should decide to go to graduate school and study cultural anthropology and study the Black church, you will never be able to go to church again and worship in the same way. And she was so right. But I fell in love with the idea. And so I went on to graduate school, cultural anthropology at Duke. There were no Black professors in cultural anthropology. And by the time I graduated, I was only the second Black student to finish the PhD in cultural anthropology at Duke. That experience was somewhat traumatizing. It took a lot of encouragement, but I had the professors back at Spelman who would support me. I called Dr. Gales in the midst of one of my crises, like, I'm gonna leave this program. And she said, no, I know a dean. And so she called the dean up in New York at one of the Cooney schools, and she said, I have this student, this bright student who must come to your school. We can't lose her. And so I ended up talking to this dean about the possibility of transferring to New York. And ultimately, I decided to stay at Duke. But it took a lot of fortitude, took a lot of encouragement from the faculty, and then other students who were at Duke who were working through the same kinds of issues. I came through Duke at a different time. They've had several Black professors in cultural anthropology since then. But it was not easy. Plus, I feel like earning a PhD is like psychological pledging. It's not physical pledging, it's like psychological. Are you really smart enough? Can you really write this? Do you have an important contribution to make to the literature and the scholarship? And so you're kind of constantly questioning yourself. But there's something about what you get, I think, at an HBCU that really girds you up to do that work, to face the challenges.
I love that. Thank you for that. HBCU students today are coming of an age in a time of social media pressure, political polarization, and constant visibility. How do you think we can protect our sense of self and purpose without disengaging from the world around us?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I've been introduced to some scholars who are working on movements to disengage from social media. Like that, because social media can put so much pressure on you to be perfect in ways that are completely unrealistic, or that show you other people's lives as if they are living such a glamorous life. But it's only this one snapshot of their life, and that can lead to depression and a sense that you're not doing enough. I would encourage students, I know this is hard, but to put a limit on whatever social media you engage, because at the end of the day, it's like talking to my son. Bless his little heart, he's in 9th grade. He wants to be on his computer playing games with his friends all the time, and he wants to be on his phone. And I say, you have this amount of time you can be on this phone, and then you need to find something else to do. You need to read a book. Why do I have to read a book? I said, okay, well, you can't find a book. Well, here's the book. Now read the book and write a report about it. Now, every time he's really happy that he's read the book. So we assign him, he said, you can't find a book? Okay, read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Okay, well, you sit with Malcolm X for a while. So there was this period of time when he was reading Malcolm X. By the time he finished the book, he loved Malcolm X. So now we call him in the house, we call him Gen Z Malcolm X. Because he would not have known what he didn't know if he had just stayed on his phone scrolling. And there's so much more to life, there's so much more to learn than the kind of doom scrolling that, these social media giants are programming us to do. This makes money for them. It doesn't benefit us, but it makes a lot of money for other people.
Completely agree. For students who want to make a change, but feel exhausted or cynical about the world around us, why and how should we engage with it?
Oh, the why, I think, is really clear. Because if you're not fully engaged, the rights we take so for granted today will be rolled back, and indeed have been rolled back. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about in my address. If we don't fully appreciate the blood, sweat, and tears that so many people sacrifice to open these doors of opportunity for people who have historically been on the margins, if we don't fully appreciate that work and then what it takes to keep, because the thing about freedom, it's not a given. You have to constantly push doors open, constantly work towards it, so that whether it's the work, I think part of what you should do as a student is maximize your time in college. Study, master your profession, your area of expertise, but then get involved socially. I saw other students at, I believe it's North Carolina A&T are suing the state board of elections, their county board of elections, because they used to have a voting precinct on North Carolina A&T's campus, and they have conveniently removed that voting precinct. And so the students are suing. So stay engaged, watch what's happening around you, and know that, young people are the people who've led these movements. I know, we talk about King, and we talk about him as if he was like 50 or 60 years old. King was assassinated at 39. Jesus died 39. So the work that they were doing, I was talking to a biblical scholar one day, and he said, we think of the disciples as old people, but the disciples were in their late teens and 20s. Like, when you think about the transformative work that can happen, it happens in your generation, at this moment that you are living in now. It's not something that you have to wait for 15, 20, 30 years. You must prepare yourself, whether that's finishing your college degree, of course, going on to law school, medical school, whatever it is. But know that your transformative moment is now. It's not down the road.
Thank you for that. Given how divisive organized religion can be, or it can feel right now, what led you to choose religion as your life's work?
Oh, what a great question. When I was at Spelman, I had a friend. I was involved in many student organizations, but one of them was a Christian students organization. And I had a friend who we went to dinner most nights, who was working on her ex in the Nation of Islam. And so we would have these debates, these serious debates about religion. And she would say, Christianity is a white man's religion. She said, why you worship blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus? So it just raised all of these kinds of questions. So I knew that I wanted to understand more, not just about the theology, religious theology, but I wanted to understand the impact of religion on the ground. Like, is religion really about politics, or is religion about something else? And how does the faith work that we do, how does that work to transform a society? So originally I was going to study it's between women in the church and women in the Nation of Islam. And I ultimately decided to study women in the church. But I've been so informed just by my research and thinking about women in Islam, particularly Black women in Islam in the US. And so it's been incredible for me as a scholar, as an anthropologist, to think about religion's impact in the world. Not only what we say we believe, but what is the actual impact on the ground.
I love that, thank you. And that is it for me, guys. But again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Armani. We had planned to have a brief Q&A, but we are already at time. But we do have a reception following this event that Dr. Fredericks will be at. If you have some burning question that you'd like to ask her while we're at the reception, I'm sure she'd be happy to take your questions. But Dr. Fredericks, on behalf of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, we do have a little gift for you, and we thank you for being our guest here today. So this does conclude our program. You all are welcome to attend. The reception is for you all. Please come and enjoy. And thank you so much for helping us kick off Black History Month.